Hello, this is Tim from Arcana, and welcome back to our lab series. This video will mostly just be focusing on setting up our STPCA DMVPN hub, so the CSR1000V over here. I've added some additional notes to our topology, including what address range we want to use for our tunnel network. I've also clarified that for our CSR, we want to run its outside interface on its own VRF. The reason we do this is to help keep the routing a bit cleaner. It helps us also get a little bit extra security on our device as well. We can start by showing you what I have here. So let me show you my device. So I have this IP addressed. We can see I put the outside VRF on this interface. This one is part of our global routing table, and both of them will have their own respective default gateways. So one of the things that this will buy us is, imagine if someone was trying to get into our device and land on its outside interface. Even if someone were to get in there, if something were to get compromised, this is the only traffic they would see. They would only know how to get to our other public networks. Versus if you look over here, we are able to completely segregate our private networks. So when we create our tunnel interface, we can kind of guarantee that all of the tunnel traffic goes directly to our core, and anything that's trying to get to outside is only used for things like our SCEP, our certificates, or our tunnel traffic. So that is that, but we will take care to put some security on this device when we push our templates to it. So let's head over to MEVO, and now that we know how our device is set up, let's go to Configuration Headends, and let's start with an SDP. So I'll do more actions, add SDP registrar. This group suffix field is used if you're creating multiple entries. In this case, we're only creating our one, so I'm going to click save. It's going to give me a warning. I don't really need to pay too much attention to that. That one is for adding classes, which we haven't done yet, so that's fine. The management IP, so this is the IP address I'm using to SSH to the device. That's 2.230. And then its outside address. Now I need to click on details and select SSH, and let me fill in my username and password. So give me 1 second here. Okay, so I'll click save. MEVO is going to try SSHing to the device. And if it can, which it did, perfect, then we should see this listed as online. Okay. Let's add our DMVPN at this point. We were doing a single cloud setup, so I'm going to leave this group suffix blank. So we'll just click save. We only have one DMVPN cloud, so let's delete our second entry. This is a 1000V. By the way, I don't think this device type matters. So if your device type isn't listed here, go ahead and just select any of them. I think at one point there might have been device-specific behaviors tied to this, but I think nowadays all the Cisco CLI is basically the same, at least on any of these routers that we're going to be configuring. So we're using the same device, so this will be the same management IP and the same outside IP. And you'll notice I now have two sections, the cloud and the actual gateway. We need to go into the actual gateway because, again, we need to supply the credentials to get into this specific device. So let me click here. And let me put in my username and passwords. Don't worry if you don't have SNMP set up on your device already. The template will automatically configure SNMP with the default values that are saved here. So just don't touch anything here and you will be good. Of course, if you want to, you can go ahead and update this with the credentials that you want, but I'm going to just leave the defaults. So I'll click save. Okay, so we actually did get an error message, so it looks like I misspoke. So it looks like SNMP should be configured on the device beforehand, but I don't think this will be a problem for us because we don't use SNMP for writing. We only use it for reading. So MEVO will still mark this online. This is completely fine. So now let's start configuring our device. So let's start with the STP. I'll go into details. Let's go to variables. So everything on this page we need to fill out, and I'll actually go ahead and show you. So for example, you see where this says CA HTTP port and these $signs here? If I go to my configuration templates page, and then I go to the Headends section of templates, and I view the STP config, if I go to our HTTP section, which is here is that variable, the CA HTTP port. So whatever I fill in on the other page is going to be populated whenever this variable is called in our template. So now that you know how that works, let's go back to our headends. And let's start filling out these variables. So I'm okay with using 8000 as our HTTP port. The fingerprint is actually the one that we are going to skip because we need to build the certificate authority on the device first. The outside interface, let's see, I think this was GI1. Oops. Yep, GI1. Organizational unit, let's see, let's call this Arcana. Organization, let's call this Lab Series. Location, Seattle. I'm in Washington, US. The provisioning mode. There's two types, self and warehouse. For this video, let's go ahead and do warehouse. The difference between these two is when you log into the provisioning page, one of them will provision the device that matches the username that you log in with. The other one will ask you for what username you want to provision once you're authenticated into the page. You can look more at our training series of videos, which will explain those in depth. PKI mode. So we are going to run a certificate server directly on our router. We're not going to do a remote authority to, like, say, an NDES server. So we'll run CS, and we need to give it some sort of password. And then our inside interface was GI2. Okay, so let's go ahead and click save. Okay, so now that this is saved and all the details are filled out, let's try to push that template to our device, and we'll see what happens here. So I need to select our template. We'll click next. Error, empty domain name. Okay, so it looks like there's other fields I need to fill out. The domain is going to be under configuration global variables. So maybe we should have come here first. The management user and password enable secret. So this is the account that's going to be configured on all of your devices. So not your headends, excuse me. It'll be configured only on the devices that you're deploying, so only on the spoke routers. So this is the access credentials to get into those devices. I will set it to just use the same credentials we use to log into the hubs because this is a lab environment. I don't really care if it's too strong. So let's go to domain information, and let me put in my domain info. What was this? I think I'm at 2.93 for my DNS. Miscellaneous, nothing there. Smart license, nothing there. SNMP we'll leave as defaults. Time settings. I need to put in my NTP address. And then we aren't doing wireless, but we'll take a look. Yeah, nothing here. So I'll click save. Now let's go back to configuration headends. Where is it? Here it is. Now let's try deploying and let's see what happens now. Line 30, PKI AAA server, PKI AAA off port, accounting port, and key could not be populated. Okay. So in a normal MEVO setup, we would probably be adding our PKI AAA server. And when we fill out these details, these variables are listed here. For our lab, we're not going to be using a PKI AAA server, at least not at first. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go into the template and we're going to have to edit it to remove any references to PKI AAA. So let's go into SDP. So here's where we're creating an ICE server. So let's get rid of these lines. I know we're going to have to come back to this. So let's come back to this in a second. Let's quickly scroll through. Okay, I think that was it. That was our previous line 30. No, that wasn't at line 30. I guess these lines aren't matching up. So that looks like a bug I'll probably need to submit to get that fixed. So we'll get rid of these lines because we can read from the variables. These are the ones that failed to populate. And it looks like our AAA rule was referencing those groups. So the way the SDP router normally works is when we go to the provisioning page, we need to authenticate in. Based off this configuration, we would normally try to be authenticating into our SDP router using our PKI AAA server or using our ICE server. So that would just be a standard radius request. Since we're not going to use one, we probably need to set this to a local account. So let's change this. AAA authentication login, SDP ACS is the name that we're using. So let's just call this, we're going to say instead of using the group ICE, which we deleted, we're going to use local accounts. Click save. And actually, this reminds me of another thing we need to change. If this is set to local, we can't actually use warehouse mode of provisioning. So let me go back to my headends, go back to SDP, and I need to change this to self-provisioning. Okay, so now click save. Normally this stuff is a lot simpler for using PKI AAA, for using separate devices for our SDP and our hub router. But because we're doing this a little bit special with less equipment, I kind of wanted to show you all the different changes I'm going to have to make to get this to work. Okay, so let's go to operations deploy. Let's check this. Perfect. Okay, so now if we click on the details button, we can actually see all the configuration that's going to be pushed to our device. And we can actually see some of the variables have been filled out in our file here. So let me select the device and click OK. And we're going to run this now. You could schedule this to run at a specific time, but we're just going to say run now. And if I bring up this, Let's see if I probably don't have logging configured. So let's see, this just says backing up. So let's just do a show crypto PKI server. So we can see some of the config is starting to be pushed to this router. I think the other thing we could check is if we noticed our outside interface didn't have an ACL on it. So let's see if our template configured one. Aha, it configured more than just that. It configured some other lines as well. So we can see MEVO is actually pushing the configuration to our device. Looks like it's still just trying to back it up. So that's not going to happen until our server is up. So show crypto PKI server. Still disabled. Okay, so this might just take some time. I may need to fast forward the video depending on how long this takes. I know that the clock needs to be synced for the server to come up, so let's just check. My clock is synced. Okay. Show crypto PKI certificate verbose CVOCS. So let's just see if the certificate exists. It does. Here's our CA cert. Start date and end date 10 years. Perfect. Okay, so it just took a little bit of time, but our certificate server is up, and MEVO has successfully said this has passed. Okay, so we'll click OK. Now we can do the same thing for our DMVPN, so let's click on the details and start filling out some information. So that tunnel network address, based off our topology, that was 172.23.241.0/24. The tunnel number, so this will be like interface tunnel, we'll call this 241. We need to give it a tunnel key. Source interface GI1. We are not using a VRF for our inside, we're only using the outside one. We'll keep BFD unchecked. I'm not sure if my CSR is licensed to do BFD. And NHRP network ID, let's just keep this 241. We need to give it some sort of NHRP security string. Let's just call this, how about N key 241. Hold time of 300. I think is the Cisco default recommendation. This spoke-to-spoke button will change what configuration is pushed to our device. We can go over some of the if statements and template operations in a later video. I'll keep this checked for now. And our IKE information. So we can do IKE v2, AES GCM. So if we're running GCM in our proposal, then we need to be running a PRF. So we'll want to double check this in our template. And once this is provisioned, I can actually go and show you the difference between these settings, but we'll leave these as the defaults. So we'll set this to 14, we'll set this to 14. We can leave these as the default, and then let's configure egrip. So I'll just use egrip 100. I'll call this our lab. Inside interface GI2, and let's turn off performance monitor. And then that VPC gateway is not relevant to us, so we'll click save. Okay, and then now let's go into our actual device proper and fill out this variable. It just needs the tunnel IP address. So let's give this the first one in the /24 range. So this will just be .1. Click save. Now before we go to deploy this device, let's take a look at the template, because again, we're going to have to get rid of any references to PKI AAA. So let's take a look at our DMVPN. So let's X out these lines. I know this line is also for PKI AAA, I can leave... No, you know what? Let's just take this out as well. So let's get rid of that. And then I know we have a PKI AAA command down in our trust point. Where is our trust point config? That's all performance monitor. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Authorization list PKI AAA. So let's get rid of this line. And while I'm here, let me go ahead and show you. So you remember that checkbox where I unchecked performance monitor? We have a if operator, if statement, a logic command down here that says if tunnel perfmon is set to true, then we're going to push all this config to it. Otherwise, we're not going to configure it. And you can see our BFD one down here as well. So because we unchecked that selection on our configuration page, these lines will not be pushed to our device. So let me click save to save our template changes. And now let's go back to our headends and let's see. Actually, there is one other thing we should check. Because we're running this on the same device, it's likely that we're going to be pushing a new ACL to override our outside ACL that we just put on. So let's make sure that what we have configured here isn't going to mess up what's on here. So show IP access list outside. Okay, so these are just permit with the default sequence being incremented. So if we add these in, I don't see we'll have any issues. We might be putting that ICMP thing on here again, but that should be fine. So let's go back to configuration headends. I'll select my cloud with my single device, and let's deploy our DMVPN. Next, check the box, okay, and run now. Okay, so this says it passed. So let's click OK. Now let's check our device. Show IP in brief. And we can see our tunnel configuration is now on here. So this covers everything we need to do. Actually, no, sorry, I misspoke. The thing we have to check on this router is we are using certificates for our authentication for our tunnels. So if I check my IKV2 profile, we need to make sure we have a certificate for this trust point CVO PKI. So here's our trust point. Let's check to see if we actually have this cert. So show crypto PKI certificate verbose CVO PKI. And it looks like we do. Okay, so sometimes, or I should restate this, MEVO will do its best for your headend routers to automatically grab the certificate when you deploy your headends. That doesn't always happen. You may need to do some troubleshooting to figure out why the certificate isn't working. So let me give you some commands to help you out. So from conft, if you type in crypto PKI authenticate, CVO-PKI, so that's the name of our trust point, this one should complete successfully. If you get any sort of error message after typing this in, it means your certificate server is not reachable. So you're going to have to figure out why your hub router can't talk to the STP. And remember, the address it's trying to talk to is going to be what's configured under this enrollment URL. Okay, 172.22.2.230. Once you're able to successfully use that authenticate command, so that was crypto PKI auth CVO PKI, You'll then need to do the CVO PKI enroll, crypto PKI enroll CVO-PKI to enroll your certificate in order to get that certificate as well. So with that out of the way, this is everything we need to do to configure our hub router. If we miss some steps, we'll just have to troubleshoot it through in a later video, but for now, this will take care of that. So I'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, this is Tim from the future. I forgot to record this part of the video to show it off to you. You might have remembered during my video, I talked about this Crypto Ike v2 proposal, which is configured under your cloud settings right here. So what I want to show you is if we actually go into that configuration, and I'm going to make a new one. So Crypto Ike v2 proposal, we'll call this Tim test. And it'll give me a message here, which I'm about to explain. If I make an encryption of AES GCM 256, and then instead of saying PRF, if I try to say integrity SHA-384, I'm going to get this error message. That algorithm is not supported with AES GCM. So I must use that PRF command instead. So PRF SHA-384. Now let me remove this. And let me change my encryption. So we're going to say no encryption. Here it is. So no encryption. And let's change this to encryption AES CBC 256. And now let's try to do that PRF command, PRF SHA-384. You'll notice that it still marks, even though it didn't give me a warning, it still marks this proposal as being incomplete. So this PRF is not compatible if we're using the AES CBC. So let's take off PRF 384, no SHA-384, and we'll say integrity SHA-384. Now let's check our proposal again. And we need a DH group. That's what we're missing. So let's say DH. It's just group 14. Let's check our proposal. Okay, so now we're not getting a warning message. So let's take off the integrity. And let's try PRF SHA-384, and let's see if that gives us a warning. And it does. So basically what I'm trying to convey is if you use AES-CBC, you need to use the integrity command. If you're using AES-GCM, you need to use the PRF command. Now, that's important because MEVO currently lets you set either or for this field up here, but the default template for your head end is set to use PRF. So if you're going to set something else, if you're going to set CBC, you need to make sure you go into your template and change this line to integrity. And you need to make sure you change this variable to match that integrity value. I think we might even be able to search it here. Let's see. I don't know the name of it. It might be a head end variable. Let's see. Ike v2. Yeah, so here we can copy this variable and then we can say integrity, Ike v2 integrity, and that's how we can fix up our template right here. As always, if you have any questions, let us know.